everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Choose Inclusion for our Black Voices Matter series. I am joined by my co-hosts as usual, Yubi and Mike. How are you guys doing today?
Excellent. Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, so we're excited to have our guests today. We've already been jumping into great conversations. We've had to cut them short so the rest of our audience can join in on this, but we're excited to have Danielle Shoots join us today. She's the Chief Financial Officer of the Colorado Trust and the founder and CEO of the Daily Boss Up. Danielle, welcome. And first question we like to ask our guests is how are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. And that is one of the hardest questions to answer in the last 4 months whenever anybody asks me that. So, in a 5-minute period, I'm happy, hopeful, sad, scared. It's definitely been like a roller coaster the past 4 or 5 months of emotions, of feeling all the things every day with everything that's going on in our environment and in our world.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely. I think a lot of people are going through that right now. So yeah, I mean, I think what a great place for us to start is to hear a little bit about your background. I mean, I don't want to put any words in your mouth because the story you tell of your background is absolutely amazing. And so I want our audience to know the context of kind of your journey. So then we can dive into all the great questions we have for you.
Yeah, I mean, from a career perspective, I have a finance background. I've been an executive for a really long time. I became the chief financial officer for the first time at the local public health department here in Colorado when I was 26 years old. So really young, the youngest CFO in any state department's history. And so have been learning about leadership and managing folks and being often the only in the room for such a chunk of my life. But that actually started long before I became an executive. It started when I had my son Kai when I was 16 years old. And so being the only or the youngest or being othered has started really early for me in life, being a teen mom and raising Kai and sort of us maneuvering through this world in a way that we often, were each other's best friends, but felt very much alone and isolated and like you didn't belong. I often felt like I didn't belong, in any room I was in, just being the youngest mom and carrying a lot of shame around that, that I really had to work through in order to be a better leader once I got into my career. And I've been across several industries, corporate America, the government. I started in nonprofits when I was still in college. And now I work for a private foundation that does philanthropic work in Colorado, as well as 2 years ago started my own business, which is about leadership development. And it's a digital startup for us to get leadership and life coaching out to folks via their phone where they are these days.
Danielle, thank you again. This is Mike Cass. I'm so excited to have you on. There's so much of your I feel like what you're doing, the impact that you're making today, whether it's with your own organization, with the coaching, with your foundation, I feel like so much of it is like because of your lived experience. And I just you sharing about being a young mom, but I'd love for you to talk about how some of those experiences really led you to what you're doing today and the impact that you're making. Um, really within the foundation space specifically, but your organization as well, please.
Yeah, um, so much of what I do is because I learned it the hard way, or I didn't have someone to help me, or because I was the only person in the room feeling deeply isolated, whether it was I was the youngest, or the only female, or the only Black female. I'm in finance, and to be an executive in finance, or to be in finance at all, and be a person of color is very rare. And I think there's reasons for that, rooted in our systemic racism that, I'm happy to share. But you're right, like my lived experience drives the way I lead. It drives the strategies and the impact I want to have in my space. And I always say, like, sort of every day of my life is a protest, because I'm getting up and walking into these systems that weren't built for me, and doing my best to change them from the inside out, doing my best to change myself, to know myself, and to bring others with me. You know, in the organization, the Colorado Trust, we're Health Equity Foundation, which is not health care, it's health equity. And that's deeply rooted in the social determinants of health, which your education, whether you graduate from high school or not, is actually the number one determinant of whether you will live a long, healthy life or not. So things like your race, your economic status, your education levels, all of those intertwined demographics of our systems actually determine your health outcomes, even more than what you eat or drink or how much you exercise every day. And so that's the work we do, which is this broad work. I joined this organization because of the work they do and the way they do it, because I believe philanthropy is one of the systems that is the most deeply rooted in white supremacy. Philanthropic foundations began as tax shelters, if we're being quite honest, for families. And then regulations were put in place to ensure that there were dollars going into the community, that there was actual charitable work happening. But that was often driven by a bunch of people who are very wealthy, sitting around a table making decisions for communities that they've never been to or have never experienced personally. And I think that's why there's been so much money dumped into philanthropy. And unfortunately, in this country, we haven't moved the needle on poverty much at all. And so for me, it was about, I'm not going to do philanthropy if we're going to do it in the way we all, everyone does it. And I'm so proud to be at the Colorado Trust. Long before me, they had already changed their model to be a community organizing model for philanthropy, meaning we do very few grant programs where we release RFPs or anything like that. We build relationship in community with our own staff and allow resident teams to tell us what needs to be funded in the health equity space within those communities. We're all across the state of Colorado. We listened to residents. We did about $3.5 million in COVID response that was completely driven by community. And we had some communities where the digital divide, access to laptops and the internet, was the major issue. Kids couldn't do anything when they got sent home from school. And we had other communities where there was no moratorium on rent, and they were telling us we need direct cash assistance for rent. And we listened and we quickly put dollars into community. And I think that's the way to do philanthropy, trust-based philanthropy. Stop telling people what they need. Our sort of reliance on on thinking that because people are living in poverty, that has something to do with them knowing what they need, or not being intelligent enough to explain how to fix it. So I think that we are doing some pretty groundbreaking work at the Colorado Trust. I'm really happy to be a part of it. And the Daily Boss Up I started because I didn't get any coaching as a leader until I had a team of 30. And I was the youngest, and I was the only Black person in the leadership team. And I was just every day feeling so isolated and not looking around and seeing anyone where I can say, how does it feel for you? And am I alone? And am I crazy? And I really wanted to start, sort of helping folks way sooner in their career with sort of the inspirations and the coachings and the lessons and journal prompts, so that you're journaling through your career and really what to talk to people about, how to get the right feedback. And so that's why I started the Daily Boss Up as, an affordable subscription-based business, so that folks could really be investing in themselves much earlier in their career before they felt like they were, flailing like I did at 26. It took me so long to understand what leadership was and to understand the importance of self work in order to be a good leader, in order to just survive often in the systems. And so that's why I started that business. All of it is based in what I believe to be broken in some of our systems, and my role in hopefully helping to fix that, and the lessons I learned the hard way and the lessons I learned the right way that I hope to share.
There's so much in everything you just said right there. Like, I hope people go back and listen to just what you just talked about over and over again, because there's so many things, right? Like, you talk about money.
Yeah.
And, I think when people give money in a philanthropic way or donate or whatever, it's there's this feeling of, like, oh, I did a good thing. or it makes you feel better. But in actuality, that discussion about money and access, people don't understand that people in the Black community, and we were talking about this in terms of numbers, which we can definitely throw out there, but like people, what is it? Black women are, starting the most businesses.
Right.
But you even said this, you spent your own money to start your own business, right? Like there
Right.
wasn't any money you could go out and get for you. Like nobody, and from a VC standpoint, when you talk about organizations, right, the numbers are ridiculously small in terms of people of color founded businesses getting money versus white people founded
Yeah.
companies.
I believe women of color are starting 89% of every business that is being started every day. I think there's a lot of reasons for that we could get into. But they're receiving less than 1% of any venture capitalist funds, or it's almost non-existent for a Black woman to receive VC funding in this country. And it's in the philanthropic space, it's in the startup space, it's in the corporate space. The message we're sending to Black women is, we know that you work really, really hard. We appreciate how strong you are, but we're not going to trust you with money. And that is a horrible message. It's a traumatic message to receive. And then when something like COVID happens, what we've done is set up these businesses to not be able to survive. And then we start over without any capital. Folks are making it day by day, trying to get to, 6 figures of revenue with their own small businesses. And then something like a COVID hits and there's just no coming back from that. And I think that is an important thing to remember. It's the access to capital for Black people in this country has always been abysmal and is abysmal today.
Yeah, and I think that like one of the things that we don't talk about enough is that trauma that Black people and Black women in particular are experiencing in the workplace, right? And
Right.
about what Black people have to walk into every day, not just when it comes to starting their own businesses, but just going to work. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, like your personal experiences with that, what that meant for you when you're walking to these executive rooms? But what are those experiences like, and what do people need to know about that in the background of it?
Yeah, a recent NBC News poll said that 50% of Black women are considering leaving their corporate job right now. And that explains why so many are starting their own businesses too. I don't think it's that Black women don't want to be in corporate America. I think that it's traumatic to be in these industries, and it has been traumatic for me. Just ask my trauma therapist about that, because I actually do go to therapy around it, because we all as humans suffer from imposter syndrome. So that's not specific to being a woman of color or a Black woman or a person of color. But what I always try to describe this as is, every human wants to belong. It's our deepest need, is to belong and to be attached. There's so much science around attachment and belonging for humans. We're born to belong. We want to be attached. We want to, that's why we're in relationships, all of the things that we do. And then you go to work, and immediately when you walk into a room, you don't belong. So there's the first indication that you are other. You are, one of these things is different from the other, right? That's how you feel walking into these rooms. So that's the initial sort of hit to your confidence, is like, whoa, do I belong here? Like, I'm nervous. And then you start to talk. And because you are different, like you're just a walking, talking representation of being different, the chances of it being pointed out to you how different you are, how othered you are, is high. And so you have folks in these environments that were not built for them every single day trying to belong to the systems. One of the phrases I hate most in corporate America is culture fit. And it's often used in performance against persons of color, but I've especially seen it used against Black women. Well, she's just not a culture fit. And I hope that we're moving in a direction where we are going to meet people where they are, instead of asking them to conform to culture, which in this country, culture was built, especially corporate culture, was built for white men. And so of course we're not culture fits. It wasn't, we were set up to not be culture fits. And so to come in that environment and have to adjust every day, you have to think about the level of inauthenticity it takes sometimes to just get through the day. And inauthenticity is exhausting, and it causes folks trauma, and it makes them question themselves in ways that they shouldn't question themselves. And I say, like, we're all of our capacity, all of our energy is just a circle, right? Like, it's not infinite, it's finite. And some of us have a lot of energy, I have a ton of energy, I can get a lot done, and some of us have less energy, but it's all still finite. And if I'm taking up so much of my energy before I walk into a room worried about, oh man, should I wear a dress or this black pantsuit to be taken seriously? And oh, I can't wear my hair curly as a black woman, so let me go ahead and straighten that so I can be taken seriously. And then be like, oh, let me take these 5 words out of my speech because I don't want that to come off as too aggressive or angry. And people like to call us aggressive and angry. When I've used up that much of my energy before I even get in the room, I'm not my best. And so there's so many days where you feel like I wish I could just go to work and do my job and not have to worry about all these other things, and how to belong in environments that I just don't even relate to, obviously, because I'm a Black woman, and these aren't systems that were built for us. And we have to accept that in our country without um, taking on so much guilt related to it. It just is the truth. And the only way to fix that is to recognize that it's the case.
So I want to thank for like I we're talking about this before we got on air, and I just want to thank you publicly, because as the token blind guy, and I've said it almost almost like a badge of honor, but I never like recognized internally what that meant, because even though I'm a white male, and as a blind person, again, I felt very much tokenism my entire career. Like I was not,
Right.
I was never part of the system, but it was your conversation, Danielle, that got me to think like, wow. And yeah, that's, and we're supposed to just add it up to another, suck it up. Right. Like it just, and yet, that's our kind of baggage to carry. And I just wanted to thank you for, like, yeah, to be able to look inside and be able to say, yeah, and yeah, suck it up. But that's really difficult, and it's okay for us to say that's really difficult, being that other person. And so thank you, because I never looked at it that way. So I wanted to first of all say thank you. I want to, like, so the coaching that you do, again, for your business, I want to hear more of like how it is that you take your lived experiences and impart some of this wisdom, this lived experience, onto others. And let's hear some amazing results that you're giving out there.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate you saying it because I think another piece of the system when you're the only is that it's often celebrated, and it's not anything any of us, should be proud of. We should all be proud when we break open a barrier or we bust through a ceiling that was made. Yes, I'm very proud of those accomplishments, but I don't want to stay there, right? And it's you almost feel like you're meant to be grateful for something that you earned. I think that's what we mean by tokenism, is that like it's not earned. So that's why that word is hard, because you earned it. It has nothing to do with being the only of anything in a room, but we are meant to sort of be like, well, like you're here. Like, what could you possibly have to complain about in these systems? You're here. Like you made it. And that's something I run from significantly. And I often coach people to be like, when you have one of those leaders, if they are the only Black person in the room and they want to stay that way, you're going to be in trouble. Like run from that person. We should be bringing each other to the table. We should be deeply dissatisfied with these statistics, even if that means for us we're seen as well accomplished. I don't want my daughter to be the only, and that would be a failure for me if she is in 10 or 15 years from now. So I appreciate you saying that, Mike. You're celebrated for the thing that also feels really traumatic at times, and so that can be very tight and pull you in two directions. And I'm so grateful because the one practice I've had my whole life is journaling. And So I've journaled my entire career. I've journaled since I was 15. And that's where my coaching comes from, is the conversations I had with myself. It's like looking back at, the first time I had to fire somebody, the first time I got a piece of racist feedback, the first time that I got sexist feedback, the first time something really hard happened to me around people spreading rumors saying I was sleeping with a superior in order to get promoted. I mean, you name it, I've been through it, which is really sad to say since I've been in this career less than 15 years. But I have it all written down, and I'm someone that has to really talk to myself because I struggle with anxiety. So I have to really give myself a plan, to like get through the things that are hard for me. And that's where the coaching comes from for young professionals. And the thing I've learned is that to be a great leader, you really have to know yourself really, really, really well. And so the time and investment that I've given to myself in my career, just because I've been leading for so much of it, I just wanted to be able to hand that off. And it's very tactical coaching. We're actually launching an app next year that is really like, hey, do this differently when you're sitting in a meeting. If women are working on confidence, often, you get women to the table now, but often they don't speak, and that's an inclusion problem, right? And so I'll say, okay, I want you to count how many times you thought something but didn't say it. Just keep a tally. Just keep a tally in a notebook of how many times you thought something but didn't say it. And then next meeting you're in, I want you to say it. I want you to say at least one of those things. I also want you to count how many times you think something and somebody else says it, just to build your confidence that your voice matters. We'll overanalyze everything as women before we speak, and that's not happening in the room. And sort of really tactical things to sort of shift your brain out of some of the habits that don't serve you, that were survival techniques, honestly, in these systems for some of us, and those don't serve us to grow our careers. The things that are our comfort zones or the survival techniques. I think even saying, um, sort of making a joke about being the only or those things, that's a survival technique, and just getting in front of it, right, Mike? Like that's a survival technique. And so at some point that doesn't serve us. And so how do we break some of those apart through coaching? And I think nobody can be a great leader that doesn't know themselves. And so that's really what we try to do, is help people focus on themselves, even if they just pause with the text we send every day for, 30 seconds. Like that's a little more than most people do, is to spend 30 seconds on themselves and be like, ooh, am I good at that? Do I do that? Is that a bad habit of mine? Those types of things, just trying to keep people inspired and focused and moving forward while learning who they are.
Danielle, I love the the amount of experiences in so many different industries that you have. You were one of the youngest executives at Comcast, so you've been in the private sector. You're
Mm-hmm.
the youngest executive in the state, so you're in the public sector. You've obviously been an executive in the nonprofit sector, and now you're starting up your own business. But one of the things we had talked about is just how exclusive that path to executive leadership is.
Mm.
And I was wondering if you had some thoughts or ideas about what you would want to see changed in those systems, on the company side, or, in terms of how can we start changing that path to
Yeah,
executive leadership?
I think the only statistic that's as embarrassing as our venture capitalist statistic, actually might be more embarrassing because we do live in a capitalist society, is around executive leadership. And sort of the number of Black women, the number of Black men, the number of people of color who are in executive positions. If you look at the Fortune 500 lists, it's just embarrassing. And the retention rate on Black executives is also embarrassing. And so even when we get there, the chances that we are going to stay are really, really low. So those stats are out there, and I think everybody needs to know them, because I think sometimes when we think about equity or inclusion, we don't separate and pull that data apart the way that we should in order to really understand what's happening. And I think the problem is that for so many years, all these industries were built on employees coming in and conforming to something. And like as a leader, you actually need to be able to lead in a way that's personal to you in order to be successful, because being a leader is really hard. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of, you know, focus on other people and not yourself. And so you're going into a system, you're being asked to lead in the way that you see other people doing it. And you're being criticized when you bring yourself into that space because it's often different than what other people have seen. I think what we do is we tell people there's this one path to success. And I think that's what we're seeing when it comes to leaders of color, is that you're just made to feel like you're doing it wrong, because the way that you do it based on your lived experience, which is different from most people in the room, is not going to conform to the system that wasn't built for you. It's just that simple if you think about it in that simple way. And I think we have to get better at letting people um, be who they are. And the other thing about leadership is, you know, the thing I think is the worst advice in the world for leaders of color is, you know, sort of leave your personal life at the door. And that's what you hear, you know, women, we get told that, and people of color, we get told that. And I think that's the exact opposite approach to leadership. I will never work in a place ever again where I can't bring my whole self to the table, because that is impossible. So what you end up trying to do is leave things at the door that actually really serve you. They're pieces of your organic self that actually will make you an amazing leader and make people connect to you and relate to you and see themselves in you. And those are the very things you're often criticized for. I say, you know, what's the difference between assertive and aggressive? It's your gender. So a woman can do the same behaviors that a man does, and a man would be assertive and a woman would be called aggressive. And then I say, what's the difference between aggressive and angry? It's your race. So a white woman can do something and be called aggressive. A black woman can do the exact same behavior and be called angry. And so the same behaviors coming from different people are perceived in really different ways based on the biases built into our system, which therefore are built into us as people. And I don't think that we can continue to operate in this space where we're asking people to conform to a system that wasn't built for them. We'll continue to see the retention rates that we do. We'll continue to see the lack of representation in our executive leadership in this country if we continue to ask people to conform to something that they can't even relate to, because it wasn't built for them. That's not their lived experience.
I'm pretty sure we were all like, okay, that was mic drop segment right there. Like like what, where do we go like that? I mean, audience, please listen to this episode over and over again. There are some really critical things as far as why we're in the state we're in right now and how we can start to get out of it. And I think that's what's important. And so, I mean, we can't thank you enough, Danielle. This was an amazing conversation. And we want to keep having more like this,
Yes.
because like that it's just, I mean, I keep saying this, but Nina, Mike, and myself, like we've just learned so much just in being able to have conversations with people like you from the Black community, leaders, sisters, brothers, parents. We're all human, but there is a history here, and there are systemic things that have been happening that a lot of people have chosen to ignore or just been taught to ignore and to
Right.
see a very specific way.
And I just keep trying to
Yeah.
remind people, like, I just wish we would stop actually focusing on the human, like on each other, and start focusing on the systems.
Yeah.
Because the second we do that, I choose to believe that most people want to fix this problem. I actually believe that to be true with every part of me. It's what keeps me going every day. I believe the people have evolved in a lot of ways in this country, but the systems haven't evolved. And if we continue to not separate people from systems, people will be too defensive to have these conversations. These systems were set up to be working the way they're working today. That's the truth. Like, that's the truth. The Electoral College was built and is still in place today, but was built based on slavery and wanting only a percentage of Black voices to count. So they down in the
Right.
South, we wanted Black folks who were slaves to be counted from a populist perspective, but not from an opinion perspective. So you got to think about that and how that permeates the system to this day, around our voting and whether Black voices are actually a part of what outcomes are, and why Black folks are like, I don't want to vote. You know, that's a problem in the Black community, but you have to think about what that's rooted in. Or, you know, I can't go drop off more than 10 ballots for folks. So I can't drive around to people who may not have transportation and do more than 10 ballots. Like, that's voter suppression against the Black community in a very purposeful way. So if you really get under the systems, and I don't even care who built them, we're beyond that. I think people want to fix them. And what we have to do is go through the painful part of realizing how much of our systems were built to do exactly what we wish they weren't doing right now.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. And so, yeah, let's keep having this discussion, please. It really has been great to have you on the show, Danielle. Part one for sure. So we'll figure out another time to come back and continue this discussion. But thank you, everybody, for continuing to listen and learn with us. Please share this this podcast and these episodes with your family and friends, right? To help them sort of join this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
for
you, Mike, and
having
thank you,
me.
Nina.
And thank you for these conversations that you're having. They're so important. And just, yeah, keep doing this. This is so special.
Thank you, Danielle, and take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.